And I do have some slides that we'll kick off with now as well. And I say this, I repeat myself often, but our recordings do go on YouTube, so just keep that in mind. We should like to share them out after the session. All right, officially welcome everyone to our session today. We are really excited. I'm thrilled because for many reasons, I am thrilled to have this group together here, but I'm really excited to bring you all together to talk about this topic that is such a powerful topic and something that probably many of us, I don't want to say struggle with, but have strived to achieve big goals in our lives. And so I was really fortunate to gather these four folks: Jennifer Chang, Jeff Marr, Atma Ganapati, and Rod Cherkis, who agreed to do this session like so quickly and so graciously, but to talk about how they all achieved a very big goal of writing a book and publishing a book. Writing, publishing, actually making this dream a reality. So we are going to talk about that today, and I am so excited because, as many of you know, I am also very much into writing. So anybody that has achieved something like this, I remember I actually went to a writing class once, and they said the difference between you and a published author is that they finished what they set out to do. And I was like, oh boy, okay, that's really a pretty salient point. And all these folks here did achieve something pretty cool. So we're going to dive in, we're going to talk, we're going to have plenty of time for conversation. So, please do think of your questions for the group. Just a little bit about South Asian Success. We're so glad to host this session today. We were started in 2024, and we aim to create a collaborative space for customer experience, customer success, and revenue. I need to update my slide. Revenue professionals who identify as South Asian can celebrate our shared culture, learn and grow together, and drive diversity in thought and practice. We are a global online community, and while we are focused on the South Asian experience, we really are kind of broadening out this year, because what we recognize is there's learnings for all when we think in sort of the South Asian, when we think about ourselves as South Asian, there's learnings we can impart on others, but there's also learnings we can take in from others. So we've really expanded out this year our calendar to include a lot of speakers that are not necessarily from our community, but people that our community and learn from. So thank you guys today for doing that and being a part of that journey with us. We are sponsored by Customer X Success, which is actually my company. So just for anybody that is curious about that information is there. A few logistics. If you don't mind just staying muted unless you are talking, feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to use the chat. If I miss it, somebody just call it out, because I'm going to be doing the monitoring of this. We won't be in presentation mode. We'll just be in gallery mode too for this chat. Be engaged. We do want to hear from folks. And again, we'll be posting on YouTube after the session. So here's our brief agenda. Nothing too complicated here. We want to hear from our authors first and foremost, introduce you to our panel. We'll have a little chat with our panel, and then we'll have open Q&A time. And we'll talk a little bit at the end about what's next for South Asian Success. Here are our esteemed panelists and people who have mastered a big goal, and sometimes multiple times. I'd love for each of you to take a moment and introduce yourselves, if you could, and in this order would be great, since it's just already set up for you. Jennifer, if you'd like to start and tell us about yourself and about your book.
Yeah, great. Thanks again for having us. So I'm Jennifer. I am the author of The Startup's Guide to Customer Success. And it's all about, when you're a startup, you usually don't have any resources. I know I didn't have like a team. I was a customer success team of one when I first started, and I was told, figure out what customer success is. And I know a lot of us have probably been in that space before. And I was motivated to create my book because I didn't have any resource. And this was like a while ago. I don't want to age myself too much, but this was a while ago when there was not a lot of great books out there, like the ones that we see on the screen, and there was not a lot of great resources. And so I was trying to just figure it out and interviewed a bunch of amazing people, decided to package it into a book and release it. So that's what I wanted to give and create. But yeah, it's been actually, we're coming up on the on almost actually no, the sixth anniversary of this book. So I'm very, very proud of everything that's done, as well as all the people I've reached out. And so, yeah, very excited to be here.
Sorry, I muted myself. That's amazing. 6 years, Jennifer. Congratulations. That is fantastic. So amazing. I needed your book 10 years ago, actually. So I was definitely in your shoes. Okay, Jeff, would you please introduce yourself and tell us about your book?
Yeah, Jeff Marr, based out of Seattle. I'm a principal customer success manager. I see on the front lines at LinkedIn right now. Yeah, the book, it's it's interesting. We didn't have the traditional journey. I didn't set out initially to go write the book. I always wanted to write a book about CS, but a publishing company out of India that predominantly writes technical publications reached out because they wanted to have a book on customer success. And in the beginning, when they reached out to me, I'm like, is this a scam? What, like, I'm not wasn't sure what this really was, because I was like, why are you guys reaching out to me? And they said, well, we saw your LinkedIn, and we wanted to see if you could put together an outline. And I said, yeah, of course. So a couple of weeks I put together an outline, and they loved it. And then I had the esteemed pleasure to co-write the book with Peter Armley, who is an industry free practitioner, but also the expert. Many of you guys probably know him. But really, the book's geared towards. I feel like there's an opportunity in the space for books in customer success geared towards the practitioner on the front line, right? So I think it's really meant to be a guide to help someone that's on the front lines of customer success, rather than heads of customer success, right? And so, but yeah, I feel like we did a good job. But it launched back in May, just 2024. So we're really excited. And thanks for having us. Me.
That is also an amazing story. And I love the lens that you talk about, because I think you are right. A lot of times you see people in leadership writing the books about how to set up the CS organization, how to set up the team, and things like that, which is also valuable. But this is a book like CSM. Pick up this book, right? This is for you. This is not the CCO manual. This is the CSM manual, which I love.
Yeah.
And also for everyone, we will put all the book links in the YouTube show notes and in our post after this, so you'll see them all there. But sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say it was a little bit unique because we have Peter, who's been kind of a leader in the space for a long time, and then myself, who's the IC, right? So I think it balances the perspectives pretty well. So yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, Atma, you are up next.
Right. Like I think Jeff and Jennifer said, I think this was a very fulfilling journey for myself. Actually, this whole thought process for me started when I completed 20 years doing what I've been doing. Right, I don't want to date myself, but it was 20 years last summer, and I was going through this reflection on what I've learned through my career in these 20 years, and I figured I was kind of rediscovering the wheel wherever I went, like in different teams and different organizations. It was everybody acknowledged the problem, everybody recognized the importance of recurring revenue, and they knew the importance of CST, but nobody knew how to go from like 0 to 10 or 0 to 100 for that matter of fact. So then I started documenting few articles, and then one article became a section, and the section became a couple of sections, and then I had this manual that I took to a few publishers, and I thought, hey, now I have enough content. Because to me, again, this was way back last summer where I thought writing was difficult. But then I realized writing is the easy part, and then talking to publishers, editing it, creating a flow out of this. And truth be told, my book is a condensed version of how to do manual rather than like a story. There is no story, there is no character. It's just a manual style of writing the book. But yeah, so that was my journey. Like I just put a few articles together, articles turned into sections, sections turned into book. And I was like, okay, I think I did the tough part of putting content. let's get it published. So I thought, and then it took me 6-7 months to kind of make the content ready and to be published. So that's my story. Like all of you who are thinking about writing, and I think you have the content, you have the ideas, put the content together, and the publisher will like you, like Jeff mentioned, right? And the book will come out.
So you said a couple of things that really stand out here, and I want to dig in. We can get in a little bit more to this process of the editing. I think what's interesting is you wrote a book about scaling, which I think is really also something that everybody is talking about. Everybody sort of needs that manual. Many of us who've worked in startup world or worked in a large company, you know that when you go from that first customer to the 1,000th customer or 1,000th customer, the world starts to change very quickly, right, around you. And are you thinking about those things? And I was lucky enough to meet Atma, and I went to Rod. I met Rod at both of your launch events, which was really cool because I got to hear you talk about that you've come up with these like principles, so to speak, that can help somebody say, hey, when you hit 100, here's what happens, right? Here, when you hit 500, here's what happens. Here are the various gates that you're going to see, and here's the changes. But I definitely want to hear from all of us, and we'll dig into this a little bit more about the help along the way, the process, right? Like what was hard, what were some of the challenges that you had. Last but not least, though, Rod Cherkis, if you don't mind introducing yourself, tell us about your 2 books.
Yeah, so I've been a long-time career post-sale executive. I was at Intuit, RingCentral, Marketo, Gainsight. And then about 4 years ago, I started a consulting business. And as I worked with dozens of clients and talked to hundreds of leaders and CSMs, I started to hear about common challenges that they had. And one of the things that I've seen that I've been pretty good at in my career is synthesizing information and turning it into sort of frameworks or little strategies that make it easier for others to understand that. I could do that both in my business and, sort of uniquely by working with so many companies, I saw these patterns. One of the challenges that I saw was that post-sale leaders were struggling to figure out what were the skills that they needed to participate at a C-level, right? Regardless of whether they were a chief customer officer, for example, or a VP or an SVP, it was a different set of skills, and people were accelerating through that quickly because our function was so young. And I decided to put this together into a framework around skills that help people develop in their career. That's a different book than how to help your company do better in its business results. This was much more about how it helps you. And so the concept behind the book is that there's a framework, this maturity model for CCOs. There are 8 skills that one could develop, told lots of stories from people in the industry. And it became really popular, which was super fun that many thousands of people bought the book, read the book, were able to apply it in their business. And that inspired me to continue doing that as I would identify sort of big common problems that I could assemble information and then share it with this audience. It's been super rewarding. And that next issue became Reach, which is a framework for driving expansion, because one of the challenges that's happened is post-sale leaders, CS leaders are expected to contribute to top-line revenue, and it was a set of new skills. So I introduced a framework to do that. And the concept behind the books is just how can you get information out to your audience in pretty efficient ways. I happen to choose writing a book. It could be through podcasts, it could be through webinars, it could be through speaking. And I think the decision one makes about that challenge, that forum, is more of a personal decision about what you like to do. So looking forward to our discussion today.
Thank you, Rod. And I will always remember, and this is what one of my most salient points about when I went to Rod's book launch for Reach, was that sales has frameworks. When you enter a company and you work with a sales leader, they will have a framework of their choice. Sandler Sales Method, Metapic, right? Like you've heard all the names. And they will actually implement that into the tooling that they use. What Rod did is the first, right, for our function framework for revenue, right? And that is, I think, really powerful. And I think, Rod, you're also working with some tooling. But I love that because I remember that stands out to me because I was like, wow, that made it so real. Because I remember having new sales leaders come in, everyone with their preferred framework, and we didn't have that, right? So now we can also speak the language of our partners in the business. So really powerful. Okay, I'm going to go off of the slides here, and we are going to shift to just conversation style. Right, I want to start with, and this is going to be for everyone, so we'll just probably go in the same order as the introductions, just to keep it kind of flowing. So choosing to write a book is a big task, is a big goal. And I would like to know, what did you do to actually achieve that goal? Like, did you have to make changes in your life, in your schedule? Did you do time blocking? Like, what were some of the steps that you said, when I'm going to write this book, I'm going to decide to do it on this day. Here's what I'm going to do to actually set out on this task. So we're going to start with you, Jennifer.
Yeah, for me, I think it really comes from the motivation part of like, why do you want to write this book? Is it to advance your career? Is it just to say that you wrote a book? Is it like, what is your motivation? And for me, my motivation was actually trying to learn how to do my job correctly to start. And so that was really key. And also, I wanted to make sure that no one else had this problem going forward and didn't feel like they didn't have the resources. Because I was told early on in my customer success career, oh, you don't have a team. Oh, sorry, we can't help you. And I just really, really didn't want other people to feel that way. And so for me, motivation was a huge reason to like keep me going, so to speak. And typically, what I got really lucky where whenever I was dealing with a problem in my own, day-to-day head of customer success job, I would be able to find someone nearby. Hey, let's go out to coffee. Let's chat about something and get those learnings and be able to incorporate that into the book. I will say I did get some help from my publisher, which is amazing. But they were more of a guiding force, which was really nice, where they actually were telling me like, hey, don't try to write the outline too much right now. Like right now, you actually haven't done a whole lot of research. You haven't talked to, the 40 plus people that you want to talk to yet. Don't try to write your book now. Try to write your book after you talk to the people, because you're going to learn from them. They're going to tell you new things that you wouldn't have thought of to include in your outline just yet. And I think that was actually a really, really great way for me to think about like, hey, what goals do I want to achieve? What vision do I want to set? Not necessarily like I want to get this exact quote from someone. It's like, no. That's working backwards. And so being able to think more strategically, like, hey, I want to just talk about onboarding. I want to talk about how do I build a team. I want to talk about just like specific things. And I think that was super helpful for me to chunk out my book and put it together that way.
Oh, that's super interesting too, on the research that went into that process. So really setting out to do pretty heavy lift, it sounds like, of research too. So that's really, really great to hear that. Jeff, how about your experience?
Yeah, I feel like when you go to college, they say you go to college to learn how to learn, right? That's one of the big reasons to go to college. And I think writing this book taught me a lot about how I like to write. And I feel like it's influenced a lot of how I write now in my day to day. I guess some of the challenges, I have a family, right? And so kind of balancing, making sure I spend time with the kids and spending time with my wife after the kids go to sleep. And then at the very end, I have you mentioned time blocks, my time to write the book, right? And sometimes I had a little bit of work to do, or I was just sleepy. So it wasn't a perfect science, but I had kind of a framework for my life. And I feel like now that as I start to do one of my own, um, I have a much better idea, much more prepared. I'm more confident in my next journey. Now, like Jennifer said, I did have some help, which was actually really, really, really key, especially for me. Right. I was motivated to write it, but it's, just like being motivated to go to the gym, right? Like I want to go to the gym. It's a decision I've made, but the execution of it every day that's another thing, right? My willpower and how much I have left in the tank after a full day, right? And so having the publisher lay out a schedule, milestones was super, super helpful because they weren't annoying about it, right? But they just kind of gently nudged me along the way. So if you could have a publisher that would do that, or if you would have an accountability partner, that's really helpful too. I did have some intrinsic motivation because I'm a projects person. I'm an ideas person, and so all the time I go to my wife, "Hey, honey, I'm gonna start a YouTube channel, or I'm gonna learn how to golf. I'm gonna buy these golf clubs." And then I told her I'm gonna write this book, and she just lumped it into the just project thing, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna follow through this time, and so that when I do other things in the future, she's gonna believe me. And so we did it, and we followed through. And not that she doesn't have faith in me; she's the best, right? But I need that for myself. I think more than anything. So what an incredible journey! I think everybody's got a book in them. Everybody's got a book in them, or a podcast, or a YouTube channel. But I think everybody has a story to tell, regardless of the life they lived. And so, what a incredible journey. So yeah, thanks.
I love hearing that. And I love that like you had obviously accountability partners. Like I just actually had dinner with some friends yesterday and was just hearing about a monthly accountability chat that somebody has and who may or may not be on this call. And they were like saying that, you know, it's really helped them to just stay on track on the various things that they are working on personally. And I love to hear that. Obviously, you had that with your publisher, but for others out there, you might not have this entity per se, but you can also lean into your network. You can lean into your family, you know. And you, Jeff, you hit on an interesting point because, like, I don't know if everyone knows, I wrote a children's book last year. I actually don't tell my family about this writing when it's happening. I'm like super nervous and I just want to like do it in my little silo and then when it's done say like I did this thing. But I love that you put that out there early because I think people say you will have more success if you do that. So, I mean, that's a really just an interesting perspective. So if others have comments on that too, I'd love to like kind of hear that. Atma, you want to give us your sort of how did you actually accomplish this feasible? How did you actually do it? What's the real?
Yeah, I think I just want to give Jeff props for the line. Everybody has a book in them. Jeff, I literally use it, and I think that's true. That's very true. And I think when you talk to certain people, when you know interact with a few people, and you realize the way they look at a particular problem, you know it's because of the experience they have gained over time. So thank you, Jeff, for that. Right, but going back to my story, I think it all happened when I transitioned from a very large multinational company where you were given tools, you were given teams, you were given resources to solve a problem, to kind of a startup where I had to kind of, I said about rediscovering the wheel, where I had to rediscover the wheel. And then I realized I went through a lot of pain, I burned a lot of fingers to get to the solution. I don't want others to go through that, so let me write an article about it. So that's how it happened. And I think, Parul, you were talking about time blocking. That's what I used to do. I was like, every Saturday morning, like after my coffee to my lunch, I would just, I'm like you as well. I don't want to proclaim that I'm doing this. Also, I think I'm sentimental. I don't want to jinx myself. I also don't want to build the hype around, right? That Mahatma's writing a book. I'm excited to read it, and then I get nervous. But I just started writing a few articles. It was like bite size. Like I would write it in 1 week, one weekend, right? Saturday and Sunday. Over the next few days, I would edit it and I would post it the next Friday. Then I realized after the fourth article that there is this momentum going right now. Like it's become second nature now. You know, the first article took me 3 weekends. By the time I was in the fourth article, I was like really had my ideas down. It was easy. It was very topical. So I could finish it fast. Then I realized there is this good momentum going. Then I took back, just stepped back and looked at the framework and started writing articles. Right? And then when I had 70 to 80% of that book already, or the content already is when the publisher happened. But I want to also give props to the tools that the publishers bring to the table. They have exceptional like editing. If I left my book as is, it would have been about 800 pages, every minute detail about everything I did on a Monday morning, and then my publisher in a very nice way said, "This is very interesting, but nobody wants to know this detail, right?" Then it came back to like 130 pages. So that's like there are tools like I mean for those of you who are I mean obviously big goals is the topic of this conversation, but if you are looking at writing a book, like people who have already published or people who have already like the publishing houses, for example, have a lot of tools that can help you understand what's relevant. Because you know what they say about cover points and pages, right? It's the same with your manuscripts. Like you might like them, but not everybody might be interested in it. So I don't want to like take all the credit here, but like I think, yeah, to answer your question, Parul, it was about writing all these articles, then sending, you know, bouncing off a third person and kind of cutting it down.
Okay, well, that's awesome. And okay, wait, you said something at the beginning, and I wonder, is it like, is this the South Asian portion of this with like a little bit of superstition leads our lives? I don't know if I'm making a big generalization there, but I think that could be a little bit of you and me anyways, Atma, right? But I think what you shared is again really important and impactful. Like you wrote maybe 800 pages, right? You wrote this detailed thing without the help and without the network, the publishing partners and things like that. You might not have had something, you might have had a book, yes, but you might not have had something that is also easily consumed in the external market. So like when it comes to big goals, and I think of this in like any goals, right? We can all talk about this. You're going to do a podcast. I don't know about you guys. Okay. This is my own commentary. I listened to a podcast the other day. It was like an hour and a half. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like a car podcast, right? This is like a sitting in the car driving podcast. This is not a quick walk to the grocery store podcast. So also kind of setting up your audience for what is the point, right? What is the purpose? Are you getting the textbook or are you getting the quick manual, right? So that's where these partners, these publishers, or people that you actually engage in your network, your family, could help you to refine what your thought is, right? Do you want to be the quick walk podcast or do you want to be the car podcast? Or do you want, so as you're thinking about your goals, really leaning into that network to help you refine to figure out what is that message and how you want to deliver it. Love that. Okay, Rod, last but not least, and Rod, I'm gonna, because I had the next question for you and Jennifer, but everyone's kind of been talking about their help. So can you build in a little of your help model since I'm actually a little bit familiar with it?
Yeah. So I ended up, I would say there are three things that I'd like to share in the next couple of minutes that are helpful, not just for writing a book, but for any of you that are thinking about a relatively big project. One of them is having an accountability partner or somebody that can help give you sort of a template or structure and keep you honest about getting these things done. I was going to self-publish my book, and I hired what's called a developmental editor. It's somebody who he actually wrote a book called How to Write a Book in a Flash. This guy Dan Janal, highly recommend it. And I basically hired him, and I met with him for an hour a week over the course of writing a book. And he helped me learn the process of writing a book. He wasn't an expert in customer success or anything related to it. He learned a little bit along the way, but he was somebody that could keep me on task, help me think through the milestones, and each week help me become a better writer by tightening it up. And that was incredibly helpful. The second piece to that is having a deadline and then working back from it. I didn't want to write a book that was going to take years to do. And in fact, I used a deadline of I'd like to use the Gainsight Pulse conference as sort of a launch event. That was kind of my target. And so I needed to work backwards on, what would I need to do to research, write, publish, and get out so that when I get to the Gainsight conference, there's things to think about. And so the second piece is thinking about timing, giving yourself deadlines, and then trying to stick to that. And one of the things that was related to that is, as I was working with Dan, my developmental editor, how big is your book? It's going to be like around 12 chapters, chapter a week, 12 weeks, book done after 4 months. And I didn't finish it in 12 weeks, but it was like 18 weeks. It was in that direction. And so it kept us on a schedule. The third thing I wanted to share is how can you break up the writing process, in this case, my big project, into smaller pieces that don't feel as intimidating. It would feel different to say, hey, I'm writing a 300-page book versus I'm writing 10 chapters. 8 of them are going to be in the same exact format. It was my CCO maturity model is 8 skills in each chapter had the same format. A story, 3 pieces of data, summary, description of the description, and then questions to think about. So once you come up with that process, it becomes okay. In 1 week, I can create an outline and a first draft of a chapter, and I would be meeting with Dan, and then I would have that done. And so having those different elements of someone that holds you accountable and that can help you learn to do that process better, whether that's a mentor, an old manager, previous manager that you've had, or somebody else who's done it before. Creating some deadlines for yourself so that it keeps you, doesn't turn into a big thing, and focuses on getting a good first draft out first, trying not to make it perfect. And then the third is breaking it up into smaller pieces so that it doesn't feel as overwhelming. It becomes a little bit manageable. And I would say that those are a couple of the key takeaways and lessons for taking on a big project.
I love that. So, okay, you hit on something really interesting. Also, in my dinner, my very interesting dinner that I had last night, we were talking about the one thing that we kind of felt like in a lot of CS people, there's this ingrained, like, I can do it all mentality, right? I can do it all. And I believe I am one of these people. So when I'm talking about myself, but I love that you went and said, I want to be coached on this, right? I want to get someone to make me able to make me, like, I can write a book. You could write a book, right? Probably by yourself, but to do it better, right? Or to do it in the way that, again, is going to meet the need of your market, right? So I think that is really, I don't know, that's just so impactful to me, because I do feel like there are times and places where we need to ask for help. And sometimes you have to enlist a coach or whatever, or sometimes you have to go and, ask your best friend. We've all done it. Like, can somebody read my resume at home? Like, take a look at this. Does this read well? Asking for help. I love that, because otherwise, maybe your project would have been solved, or it would have taken more time, right? Without the project management a little bit.
Yeah. And
So interesting.
I viewed that as part of why I was writing the book. It was helping me learn new skills. I was curious about learning skills. What does it mean to write a book? If I was going to do a podcast, I would go talk to people who've done that before and learn. Because if you're going to invest so much time and energy into doing it, I wanted it to be good. I didn't need it to be perfect. I didn't know it was going to be so impactful and so well read, but I wanted to be proud when I was done. And I'm the type of person that would rather go and talk to people who've done it before and learn from them as part of my research process, as part of me developing new skills. And whether it was somebody that could help me with the sort of that, developing the outline, what's the process of writing a book. And when I had to do the front cover and the back cover, I worked with somebody who had an expertise in that. And when I was thinking about, how do you market it and how do you make a big impact when you are ready to, announce it, I had somebody that helped like pull it together, a publisher and someone who did that for a living that I learned from. And all of these helped me understand that there's a process to it. And then when I wrote the second book, it was incredibly less intimidating. And I used what worked in the first one. You'll notice it's the same colors, the art design is similar, the layout's similar, the sort of structure of the book. So the content is different, but all of those things that worked well the first time that you invested in yourself and getting better, you can apply to your next experience. And I think that's a lesson for all of us too on projects. How are you learning and then applying those learnings to things you do in the future?
Muted myself. Fantastic. No, that's great. And I love to hear that. That, like, it's a skill. It's not just something you're doing. And this is probably true for any big goal, right? Many times, if you've never taken it on before, it is actually something to be learned, rather than just something to figure out. In fact, even like the other day, I officially learned how to do a Zoom breakout. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I had not really done it much. So I was like, oh, little skill that I had to actually get trained on. Okay, I'm gonna split it up just slightly, but I want to keep a little time for questions. So, to Jeff and Atma, how did you measure your personal success in this journey? Obviously, maybe you had a deadline from your publisher, things like that, but like, how do you know, like, yes, I am actually on track? No, I'm not. yes, I'm doing well. No, I'm not. How did you measure that success?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. Honestly, I just to your point, I really just want to hit the deadlines, right? Like that was to me, like selfishly, that was my goal. But I think at the end of it, as I look back, success really is um, did I add value to the reader, right? The intended audience, right? Do I feel like they can pick this up and apply what's in there right away, right? Because I know if I watch a YouTube video, if I listen to a book or read a book, like I want to find things that I can use immediately, apply into my life. And so what when at the end of each chapter, I look back and like, okay, can I, as a maybe new to CS or a practitioner, can I pick up the tools or the frameworks, the toolkits, whatever we have all the words for it at CS, right? Can we take that and apply it and be better right away, right? So I think that was probably one of the first success metrics for me. And then the other one is, am I growing? Because I noticed as I speak and as I write emails, the writing has helped so much. I It may be hard to believe, but I used to use a lot more filler words than I even do now, and even in my speech, it's helped. And I can't, right? So I think from at least selfish perspective, like I'm growing as I'm going through this. At the end of the book, when I finally submit my last chapter, I was like, yes, feels so good. And then the publisher came back like, oh, we got a lot to fix. I was like, oh no. And I was like, ah. So they came back a couple of times. So I got that feeling of success at the end of it a few times because I thought I was done. But you guys know the feeling at the very end when you're finally submitted, they accepted it. That also did feel like success, even though that maybe wasn't an original metric. But thanks.
That's awesome. I love that. Atma, how about you? How did you measure your success?
Yeah, I think I have a similar story to Jeff. The only difference is I think for me, quick wins are important. Me as a person, and for those of you who are starting this journey of book writing, it is a long journey, right? Um, like number of days, months might differ depending on the content that you're picking, but irrespective of how long it takes, it will feel long, right? So two things that helped me a lot. One was deadlines. I think Rod mentioned this, and I 100% right. Because if there was no deadline, I would still be editing my book to make it even better, to make it even better, to make it, there is this feeling that you inherently have that nothing is good enough for your first book, right? And then that's why you need the deadline. Like, yeah, my deadline slipped twice. I was like, okay, let me finish it by December 31st, 2023, and then it slipped, and I'm like, okay, May 13th is my birthday, so I'm like, 2024, May 13th, let's push it. Still slipped and it went out in July, August. But still, it still went out, right? If there was no deadline, I would have done it. So I think for me, success is finishing. I think Parul mentioned, right? Is the only difference between an author and aspiring author is finishing the book, right? That's one thing. And second thing is, initially I put out articles like I was talking about in the beginning. I wrote a lot of articles that I put out on LinkedIn, and it got a lot of positive feedback. Like people in my common network, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, this is a helpful article. I use this framework in this article." So that gave me the confidence. I think that was kind of the initial motivation I needed. If I can measure that as a success, I don't know if it counts, but yeah. So these two things are important.
Yeah, I mean well, and honestly, if you didn't publish your book in July, August, I wouldn't have met you. We might not be here today. It's all meant to be. But no, I think it's interesting because obviously deadlines are so important. You may not meet every deadline, but that doesn't mean you failed, right? In a big goal, there could be pivots, there could be changes, right? That you have to also accommodate. So like building in some room for flexibility, right? I always like to say in like a webinar, like buffer, right? Buffer time, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, just to make sure that we don't run all the way to the end and we don't have time to achieve everything we want to achieve. So like I feel like in a way your message is a good one, because I think people often can feel discouraged if they don't meet the deadline, but that could be for a good purpose, right? It could be for more research, as Jennifer mentioned. It could be for some, other goal, right, that you needed to achieve to round out the section. So it's really nice. Okay, I'm going to switch it to Rod and Jennifer. A little change up here for you guys. What would you have done differently in this process? Like, if you could start over from the beginning, is there anything that stands out to you to say, I wish I did this. I think this would have helped me achieve this goal better. Or if there's nothing, maybe it's something else from another role experience you could share.
Ooh, what a great question. I think I wish I had better time management. I think if I could say that anytime, just like what Atma said, I could, even today, I can still find like little typos or little grammatical errors, or, oh, I could have made this one a little bit clearer, things like that. And that will always be never ending, which is why deadlines are just so important. But yeah, just general time. Sometimes I would go, I mean, I don't know if people have seen my book, but it's like something like 500 some pages, which is a lot of really amazing information. But there's some moments where I was like, oh, wait, I spent a lot more time on, for example, the earlier parts of customer success instead of the later parts of the customer success, like the customer journey and things like that. And I kind of wish I spent time a little bit more evenly throughout, because, just like us, when we're creating our new playbooks, we tend to spend a lot more time on the beginning ones instead of the end ones. And I made that exact same mistake when writing the book. So there's a couple of things in there I wish I would love to spend more time focusing on. But I think overall, I'm still kind of, to echo a lot of what people have said here, still proud that, once it's out there and it's helping people and people are reaching out. And I'm very thankful that there's been a couple thousand copies or sent shared as well. Like, I'm still proud of what I've done, even though I know it wasn't, to the standard or to absolute perfection that I wish it were.
Well, perfectionism is, often the place where we're hardest on ourselves. But I think you make like a great point. Like, time management, we can always be better, but like maybe by sticking to your time management, you were able to achieve this goal, because perfectionism could have beat you, right? It could have taken over time management, and then you could have just been forever in the cycle, as Atma was kind of mentioning. Rod, anything on your end of things that you would change in your journey process, anything that stands out?
It took me a little while when I was writing the first book to recognize that getting things out on paper in a way that was like very solid and good enough was going to make for a really good book, because it included lots of stories. It was very relatable. I had this urgency to make everything perfect, to think that I was writing for a really good CCO, let's say, to make them a fabulous CCO. And as I started talking with more people, I realized that my audience were the mass number of folks that maybe aspire to a post-sale leadership role in the future, but are starting at a different place. And so it didn't need to be like how to get to that perfection, but it could be a set of stories about how to progress in your career from wherever you are at. And that was a little bit easier on myself than to write each of the chapters, because whatever the stories were from the people that I was talking with would be informative, because they were just relatable and they were interesting, and there were people maybe that you've seen or that you've worked with or companies that you've heard of. So I think that was probably the one thing that I wish I had understood and acknowledged more quickly. It would have helped in my process. Certainly helped in my second book, because I realized that I could, just kind of share the information that I was learning, and people are really going to skim it. Like, a really good piece of advice for the book was like, hope that someone could read it on a plane flight, that I wasn't writing a textbook, and therefore it didn't need to be as precise with every word and sentence. It was more the ideas and, the topics in there, and people could stop wherever they were going. So I think that was something that I learned along the way.
Yeah, the stories are so impactful. I'm like currently listening to an audiobook, and every time this author is talking, I'm like, I feel seen. And I think that really helps us connect, right? So that's an awesome learning. All right, we're gonna wrap up this portion so we can get into Q&A, but I have one last question for everyone. tell us your biggest piece. I think you guys have given amazing advice. Tell us your biggest piece of advice for a future writer. This is focused on your goal that you achieved. Obviously, people might have different goals, but I'm kind of curious, what would you give if somebody had advice to say, you may get reached out, let's just say after this call, you're going to get reached out by people saying, hey, I loved your story, would love to chat with you about writing a book. What would be your advice for them if you had to say it right now in the call? So let's start with Jennifer again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really staying curious and not being so wedded to your outline too early. And not like, don't even be wedded to your main thesis or your title. Because you will learn something, things will change, and sometimes they won't. And that's completely fine and that's cool, but sometimes, most of the time they will. And so just making sure that you're open-minded, even as you get started. And as Rob was saying earlier, chat with all of us, learn more about our journeys, and so that you don't make the same mistakes that we did, or can just see other different perspectives.
That's awesome. I love that. Jeff, you're up next.
Yeah, I would say, like I was mentioning earlier, just start. I think, like I said earlier, I think everybody has a book in them. Right? You think about the rich lives that we lead, right? The only little glimpse of it we get to hear on a call like this, right? But I think we all have a book and a story to tell, and sharing those stories, like you said, Prue, like that they feel like you get them, right? Or they get you, and that sort of thing. So I think just to start, when you see athletes kind of talk trash to the competitor, right? That can be a helpful motivator in the beginning. It wasn't me talking trash, but just speaking it out loud. And there's this old book called Hung by the Tongue, right? You say it out loud, and you're kind of, putting yourself out there, right, to follow through. And I think for me that was really helpful. But just to take the first steps, right? And Jennifer saying not to overthink it. You get this paralysis. It's really easy. When I was submitting each chapter, I got to the point like I've gone through this so many times, and I'm just gonna hit send. Whatever. Like it's gonna go. It's gonna send. And if someone doesn't like it, you can't please them all, and that's fine, right? And so I think just getting started and hit send.
That's awesome. Yes, just get started. That's the easy message for everybody. Okay, Atma, you're up next.
Yeah, I think one advice to my earlier self, I think, is a better way to put it. Um, I think identifying the right profile that, like, obviously all books are good for everyone, and there is something that you can learn from any book. But what I realized from my experience, I think it also goes back to your previous question: what I would have done differently. One would be to zero in on the profile, right? So I could have told the same story, and that was my problem of coming up with more content than required. Was like I was trying to explain the same framework or the same best practice to a CSM, to a CCO, or to a startup founder, and I think this is where a publisher or somebody else is like, who is your audience? I think I also heard this Rob mentioning, and I heard this from somebody else as well, that also had to narrow down and bring it down to 150 pages is like keep it flight worthy, right? Keep it crisp, keep it to, okay, this is a young startup founder who doesn't know anything about CCO would pick the book up. By the time they land, they'll have at least some understanding of how that runs. I think identify, zero in on the profile, like be the profile, like think in their shoes, and you would get a good narrative, good story.
So important. I love that. Focus on your audience, right? In anything we do, we focus on our ICP. It's no different here. Okay, Rod, last but not least, your piece or pieces of advice here.
Yeah, my last tip is get others invested in your success. The more people I told that I was doing it, I was emotionally getting committed to it. That I said to this person, I'm going to do it. When I was researching the stories about, let's say, the development of skills and experiences that help you grow your executive level career, I then had 40 people that I had stories from that I was going to include in the book. And then I've said, hey, I'm actually going to finish this and you're going to be a part of it. And so I think that commitment to saying, hey, I'm doing something helped motivate me to actually get it done. And the secondary benefit is I now had all of these people who had participated in the writing process, and that when the book came out, felt like this was going to be a really good way to help tell the story. And so I had sort of preceded the audience with advocates that were going to be able to say, this is a book you should read, or, I'm part of it, and they felt proud to be part of it. And so I think that was the second, secondary benefit.
That's awesome. That is very contrary to what I do, and I need to take that as a piece of advice to try. Okay, so I'm going to shift it over to the audience. Hopefully we covered as many topics as we could in this period, but I'm sure you have questions. So feel free to unmute if you'd like to. I don't think we have a huge group, so we should be able to ask a question. I know we're right near the time, so if you want to direct your questions too, that could be helpful just to get them answered in a timely fashion.
Hi guys, thanks so much for chatting with us for the past hour. My question is not a happy-go-lucky one, but a very wanting to get inside your brains, in the sense of, did you have any big meltdown moments in the process, right? Like, I think that almost reassures us, like, that we're human. Or did you have like a crying night, or I give up, I'm not doing this kind of moment? And how did you kind of overcome that hurdle, right? Like, I know you said accountability partners, but a lot of it is also mentally, right? Like your mental health and well-being throughout the process. So how did you stay on track with that?
Anybody feel like chiming in first? Jeff, go for it.
Quick answer. Yeah, there's a time where I missed a deadline for one chapter probably 3 times, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And Peter, my co-author, like putting pressure on me because he would just hit his deadlines every single time. I'm like, Peter, you are killing me, right? And I'm just like, and I keep giving all these excuses to the editor, and I'm saying, I got this stuff with my son's got soccer, and my wife's, all this stuff, right? And I was just feeling super overwhelmed, and I was like, you know what? It's gonna happen when it happens, and if they fire me off the book, fine. They weren't gonna obviously gonna do that. I just had to step back, right? I don't think I didn't push like a magic button or anything, but I just had to kind of give myself grace and say it's okay. It was helpful that the editor understood, but I just personally felt really bad. I mean, I don't know if there's a magic trick to fix it, right? But to your point, just to be relatable, right? That sucked, right? And I felt an immense sense of pressure because this other person I really, really look up to was crushing it on the timeline, and I wasn't, right? And so I think it's okay. At the end of the day, it got sent and it worked out, and nobody remembers that. At least I hope, right? Except myself, right? But it can't help it. It's gonna happen.
It's a great piece of advice. Parallel, if you don't mind, I would like to. I think I'm just I'm like the embodiment of meltdown, Julia, for writing books. I quit writing books thrice. Just so that I started during COVID. My book, like for those of you who don't know, got published in 2024, and 2022 was my milestone birthday, and that's when I was like, okay, let's get a book out for my milestone birthday, and then COVID happened. I'm like, the moment I wanted to write a book, there is this world-impacting pandemic. Maybe I shouldn't even write a book, right? And then I quit there, and then whole back to office, new normal. There were so many changes. Again, like I'm just like to Jeff's point, acknowledging that any big goal, that's why it's called a big goal, right? Otherwise, it's not a big goal, right? But also just to give you my kind of solution to the problem was making it a routine. I know, I think I said this every Saturday morning from my breakfast to lunch, like 4 hours block to doing the most important thing, which was writing. Right. Once I had the content, everything else was was a snowball effect, right? And I think critical path, for those of us who are project managers, critical path activity was writing. and I made it. In fact, now that Saturday morning has become a crutch in my life to manage change. So I know, like now I'm pursuing my fellowship because I need something to do on my Saturday mornings, right? But I think that's that. Like I think making it a routine. Um, Things happen. They don't like every plan is supposed to make that roadblock. Uh, Hopefully not another pandemic, but you'll have your own roadblocks and then you work around them. I think making a routine out of your big goal, like time blocking and making it a routine, like you'll get it done eventually. So,
Any other questions from the group? I mean, I think, Julie, your question is so great because managing mental health too is, that's a huge part of big goals can help, be a bit of a weight on that. So, in this process, do check in, make sure you are, feeling good or overcoming, right? Because if there are obstacles. But anyone else have questions or want to give thoughts on that?
I'd love to share a thought about the question about when something changes. So I wrote an entire outline for a book that I had to stop. So the first book that I was going to write was about scaling organizations at fast-growing companies. And then a couple of years ago, the stock market changed, and instead of companies investing in growth, they needed to be profitable. They started laying off people. So this whole book outline that I had done was entirely useless. And the advice that I would have is you need to like accept what's happening and decide what you're going to do about it. You can't say, well, I've done all this work. You kind of have to maybe make a decision. This is a sunk cost. I can't look back and say, well, I did all this work. Question is, what am I going to do from now on to respond to it? And I decided that I could write a different book and I would start a different outline and take a different process to meet the need of the moment, but not dwell so much on how much time I had invested in something that maybe didn't turn out or didn't work. And in particular, this was entirely outside my control. And so I think the lesson there was to just acknowledge what's happening. If something needs to change, decide what you're going to do about it, and then move forward rather than looking back.
That's such a interesting point. I mean, sunk cost fallacy in your life, right? Like, I think it's sometimes so difficult to move on from something you've put a lot of time into, but when the scope completely changes, you also have to consider a pivot, right? That's awesome. I'm sorry to not keep questions coming. Thank you all. And thanks for the candid discussion and answers from these authors today, because I really feel like if you have a goal to achieve, writing a book is one of those goals that many of us put maybe in our minds and strive for. This group really helped us, I think, understand different paths, different processes to achieve these types of big goals. And hopefully you took something away from that to, take home and maybe inspire you for your next big goal. I know we're at time. I'm going to share this for our audience, our upcoming events at South Asian Success. I hope you'll join us in the future. You can catch this on YouTube. I'll be linking all the books there so you can go purchase them. I think they're all on Amazon too, so you can go and find them there. Thank you all again. And for those that joined us, it was great to have you, and I look forward to future sessions together.
Thanks so much,
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, bro.